Hello, welcome to this fourth and final session, and indeed sixth and final video in this presentation online of the Microsoft Educator Badge course for Stonyhurst. This is based on the June 2023 version of the course. You may be doing this at a different time. And this is probably the element of the course which is most out of date if you're looking at it at any time, even in July. So if you're a month or so late for the June 2023 course, perhaps just get in touch with me before you go too far down the route of using this video. So we're here at the end of our 4 weeks. We've looked at the whole concept of blended learning. We've looked at OneNote and PowerPoint Recorder and how to use that. We've talked about accessibility, inclusivity and empowerment. And now we're going to look at something a little bit more resolutely practical, which is about structuring teams through channels, tabs, files and apps. Now, in doing this, in the Stonyhurst context, we'll need to be aware that we use OneNote quite heavily, and that the original Microsoft version of this course, which I have pulled around quite a lot in the case of today's session, puts a lot of emphasis on creating particularly channels that might match up to the folders that are in OneNote. There's actually no connection between those things in technical terms, and that doesn't have to be in organizational terms either. But what we're going to look at is how to determine a structure. I think we already know how to create and share new teams. Please do shout if you don't. So I'm not actually going to show you how to do that, because I think that's something that we are pretty used to here anyway. But we will look at how to customize your teams with tabs. So let's have a look at what a team actually looks like. This is a typical team. It's the music department team, and you'll see that there it's a normal sort of layout with some channels, some tabs. It's showing the Stonyhurst Music YouTube page there, and we'll have a look in detail at some of the elements of this. You'll see that it's not the whole team screen. There's also, on a normal team screen, a set of icons to the left, and that's the space that is just for you. Everything else is public, so everything on the left hand side is about you. Microsoft like to call that the me space, and everything that's showing on the screen now is the we space. So zooming in here, you'll see there's some channels here, and of those channels, 3 of them have got little padlocks next to them, and that means that they're private channels. So this is a private team, which means you have to be invited to be a member of it. So sorry, you don't all get to just go and search for the music department team and read all the exciting things that are there. Within a team, channels can also be public or private. If it's a public channel, like the score library or VMTs, that means that all members of the team are in that channel and can access everything in it. With the padlocked ones, those ones are locked down to particular people. So when you create those channels, you invite particular members of the team to it, and the other members of that team can't even see that they exist in order to look at them. So, for example, this has been used very well in the academic HODs team, because it means that each director and their HODs can see the teams for their departments, but not the other ones. They can't even see that they exist. Up here at the top, we have tabs. And you can see that there's posts, which is where the chat is. There's files, we'll look at in a second. Staff notebook, because this is a staff team. We'll talk about the different types of teams in a moment. There's a reflect tab, which is to do with emotional well-being and emotional intelligence. That's mainly for class teams, but Microsoft have included it here in staff teams. Then I've got two examples of apps there: music ordering, which is a form, and YouTube, which is just a website, just a link to the Stonyhurst Music YouTube page. If you click on the Files tab, this is what it looks like. I think we're pretty much familiar with this, as we've looked at in a staff meeting earlier on in June. Really, both OneDrive and Teams files are just a way of looking at SharePoint. You can open this view in SharePoint, but it does give you a few more options in SharePoint, and it is possible to get it wrong, therefore. In SharePoint, but this is a really great place to store files. By default, all the files can be edited by all members of the team. If it's a management team, that's not necessarily an issue. In a class team, there's also a class materials folder, and if you put things in that, then by default they can't be edited by pupils. And as I said, you can also add apps at the top here as well. So when you click the plus, you get a number of different options. You get, for example, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. You could put the tracking document for a particular playroom up there at the top. You could put a PowerPoint presentation that you want people to watch, or it could be a form that is filled out regularly, as in my case with music ordering. I've also just put a link to a website. In my case, it's YouTube, so that we can see the Stonyhurst Music channel. It takes you directly there. And this is this set of tabs at the top is set for each channel. So you can see that within a departmental team, you might have a lower grammar channel, which has, for example, a link to the Word file of the a tab, I should say, for the Word file of the lower grammar syllabus, and also an Excel file, which is the lower grammar tracking document, and then for grammar it's the same, and then so on throughout the playrooms. Now, when we're thinking about how to structure a team, it is similar to structuring a OneNote notebook. Now, this is where it becomes obvious that these are actually two separate products which were originally designed to do two different things. So OneNote is designed to be a folder for individuals that has lots of collaboration opportunities. A team is designed to be a collaboration space with some options for individuals to keep their own materials. So there is an overlap, particularly as OneNote becomes more and more collaborative, but it is important to recognise the distinction. Each class team comes with a notebook, and within that notebook we're used to working with every individual's folder, and the people that have a folder are the members of the team. So we see them perhaps as this one place, but actually it's two. But by analogy, you can see perhaps that a team is like a notebook, a channel is like a section, a tab is like a page, and there's particular types of content you can put in there. So it is analogous, but it's not the same. So although in our class teams you automatically get a notebook, sections don't automatically become channels or vice versa. Pages don't automatically become tabs and vice versa. And you can't set, for example, a Teams tab and assignment. So for pupil work, that should all be done still in OneNote. What Teams is there for is to support it. So say there's a website which pupils in a particular class use regularly, you should put that as a tab at the top of Teams. Then they never ask you the address. In music, for example, there is a website that we have used over a number of years. We're actually coming away from it now, called Noteflight. And if you go to noteflight.com and log in, it won't work. But if you go to stonyhurst.noteflight.com and log in with the username and password through Microsoft, then you get in. And until I put the tab at the top of each class team, every lesson somebody would try to log into the wrong Noteflight site and might even create themselves an account and wonder why things weren't working. So when you want to direct people to exactly the right website, rather than Googling it, no one seems to know how addresses work these days. They just Google the address and hope that it comes up with a website. It's really helpful. It's also for forms for administration. It's very helpful too. So there are 4 types of teams that you'll be using in education. There are 2 for students and 2 for adults, and the structures and what comes with them in terms of notebooks vary according to their purposes. So a class team is the one that we are most familiar with. Microsoft say, with their American way of thinking of education, that this is essentially one class, as in you selected it for a semester. So it's, for example, Teams for Education 101, and when 101 is finished, you go to a different class for 102, and you therefore have a different class team. Here in the UK, it's used generally in a different way, and here at Stonyhurst, we're actually doubling things up even further. So actually, you might end up in September going back and finding your previous year's teams and reactivating them, because they will be automatically archived at the beginning of September, so that people on a 2-year course have essentially one class for the whole 2 years. So we're using it in a slightly different way to what it was originally intended. So in a class team, it comes with a general tab. It comes with everything that you would expect in any of the other teams. It has 2 additional features compared to quote-unquote normal team. One of those is in the Files tab. There is already automatically created for you a class materials folder, and anything you put in that can only be edited by teachers, so students can see it but they can't edit it. And the other thing is it comes with a class notebook with collaboration space, content library, teacher only space, and of course each pupil's individual folders. There's also a staff team. So a staff team is very similarly organised, but it's really for sort of the sort of administration and an office-based activity. So the idea here is that you just get a normal team with a notebook for your staff. There's then the PLC notebook, the PLC team rather, the professional learning community, and that is basically a staff notebook, but all members have more rights within that. So in a staff team, a lot of the things are private by default or can't be edited by default, and we'll look at some of those settings in detail in a moment. In a professional learning community, it's a bit of like a cross between class and staff. There's also some interesting templates for CPD in the notebook that comes with a PLC team. And then there's the other, which is essentially the normal type of team that you would use if you were using Teams standard corporate version rather than the education version. And that does come with a notebook, but everybody doesn't get their own one. So if we look in a bit more detail at some of the settings you can set for a team, and when I say you, I mean you as an owner of a team. And this applies across the board to all types of teams, but the language changes depending on what type of team it is. If it's a student-facing team, then you have students and teachers. If it's not student-facing, because it's used for administration or professional learning, then you have members and owners instead. So a student is a member and a teacher is an owner. Within our June 2023 cohort Microsoft team, actually that is a class team as if you were students. So you are all I added you all as members, and that brings you up as students, and I'm the teacher of the class, if you like. Hidden under settings, there's a number of different options you can set. You can set different themes for the teams. There's various permissions we'll look at in a second. You can have some extra permissions for guests. People without a Stonyhurst email address can access Teams, but they're very much more locked down. They can normally only post things, and that's it. They can't actually create anything. The at mentions, this is an interesting one, because when you're at mentioning somebody, that is in a chat you just type at and perhaps the first letter of their surname, and that enables you to tag them into something. When you at someone, it sends them a notification. So therefore that's something which you might like to lock down. Team code, probably not hugely relevant. But essentially, rather than having to invite lots of people to a team, you can create a code where if they put it into a particular website, they gain an invitation to the team that way. It's probably not relevant for us at a school. Things like emojis, memes, GIFs or stickers can be enabled or banned by you as the teacher. OneNote class notebook. This is a really interesting place to go. If at the beginning of the year, when you set up your notebook for the first time, you don't get the sections right, you can redo it in there without having to delete everybody's sections and start again. There's also something to do with tags, where certain elements, for example within assignments, could be tagged to give them little labels, and you can decide whether members can do that or not. But probably the most important one for us to look at as teachers are the member permissions. It's actually very specific. So at the minute, in this channel, members cannot, and this is pretty much the default for class teams, members, that is pupils, can't create and update channels because it's not ticked. That's probably how I want to leave it. If you do click that, you can also allow people to create private channels or not. You can allow people to delete and then restore the deleted channels. Add and remove apps, upload custom apps, create, update and remove tabs, create, update and remove connectors. That's where information can go from the team to other apps. And then here's another one. Any owner can delete all messages. Literally, actually press a delete all messages button. For teams with multiple owners, you might not want to set that if, for example, you're a head of department and you don't want your department to be able to just delete all of the messages. And then there's the option here to whether you want to allow people to delete or edit their messages once they've been sent. That's an interesting debate. If somebody said something they didn't really mean to, perhaps an embarrassing mistyping or just a mistake in conscience, perhaps, you can allow them to delete it straight away. The damage may well have been done. There may be screenshots there, and you might be thinking that you want the proof there. We don't really have a school policy on that, partly because we don't really use Teams chat very much. But if you have strong opinions, you can change that. But as it stands at the minute, that's the default across Stonyhurst for class teams. At the minute, as it stands, the way that you structure teams is pretty basic, in that all of the things that we have to put in there, like this is mainly assignments for classes, you have to do afresh every time you do it. So it doesn't feel necessarily like you need to do lots of structuring, because you're going to do it on an ad hoc basis anyway, and really OneNote is the place where the structure sits. But over the summer that may well change, and this is where this presentation is immediately out of date. So in January and March I attended some webinars on this new piece of essentially new app that goes into Teams, that will come free with Teams. in January it was such an early version that they hadn't given it its name yet, but on 9th of March they presented a pretty fully featured version called Classwork. So you can see from this screenshot that this chemistry teacher has got matter and its properties, and they've got under that sort of unit of work, they've got a OneNote page. They've got an assignment called Observable Properties. They've got a Word file. They've got a link to the Khan Academy page on states of matter. And they've got another assignment, which is a discussion that happens in a channel. Now, this is essentially a representation of a scheme of work. You can't do this yet because it's not going to be released until July. It was originally supposed to be June, and at one time we were going to be at the forefront of testing with it, but the slots all filled up before I got there. So it's something we'll have to experiment with over the summer. Now, the direction of travel with this is pretty clear. This is a slide that was shown by Microsoft at the webinar on the 9th of March. What they want to do, and this won't all be in version 1, they were very clear about that, is that we should be able to create some new materials and organize those materials, and then, this is the second slide, reuse next semester, use it again in a different class or in a different year. So the goal should be that there will be, for example, a lower grammar RS set of resources in Teams, not in OneNote, but in Teams, which you then reuse through the different classes and the different years, the different cohorts, I mean. Now, at the minute, we can do that with anything that's in OneNote, because you can reuse a previous year's OneNote class notebook as the basis for the next year's class notebook for that same playroom. What you can't do is do that with assignments and any other content you put in Teams, such as announcements or the website links or app links at the top of the page. So that's what it's trying to solve. It's also not possible at the minute in a really easy way for two people to collaborate on a scheme of work or details if they're not in the same team that's actually a real class. So they need to be able to collaborate on a lower grammar class that is not actually a real class before the stuff gets distributed to them. And then classwork will of course integrate with insights in a way that is then perhaps across several different classes. So again, going back to the LGRS idea, if everybody has got the same end of topic assessment on Judaism, it should be possible for the head of department to look across all of the classes, not have to go and look at each of them individually on insights. So the idea is to make it a bit more of a management tool, but also to enable the reuse of information and the planning of resources a little bit more easily. So this is what classwork will look like by version 2. It was supposed to be available by now in version 1, but that's now slated for July. As it stands at the minute, they're not planning in version 1 to make it possible to reuse modules between teams. That's really frustrating because we don't know how much you'll be able to copy between different teams. So if you've got your lower grammar Judaism scheme of work in LGL, for example, you won't be able to share that whole module with a different class. The individual bits you can, as you could before, but the whole module you can't. So you're replicating that module in another class. And that also goes for changing it from year to year. That's what they're calling a version 2 feature. And initially, at the moment, the reason that on the screenshot I showed you, they've split it up quite in quite a granular way, where you've got one OneNote file and one assignment and one link and so on, is because there isn't room for another level of the hierarchy. So you've got the topic, which has those 6 things in it, and that's it. When you get to wanting to say 3 things, 3 subtopics about a particular topic, it becomes quite messy. Another thing that I would quite like to do is have a little bit more individualization of pathways. So rather than calling something extension work or stretch and challenge and hoping that the right people will find it, you can actually have that material prepared and then allocate it to the relevant people, which would be really sort of helpful for the very mixed ability classes we have in some subjects. So that's it on Teams, really. A lot of it is wait and see. And I am guessing that the in-person version of this will finish slightly early and slightly frustratedly that we can't have a play with classwork, which was due to be the main element of the session. But when we look at it over the summer, at least we know how it will work. But you do still get an achievement code for this session. So if you head into Microsoft Learn Now, and here's the achievement code here at the bottom of the screen. And once you've done that, you should, under your activity, get not just that badge, or I should show this badge for Teams, but you should also get the overall Microsoft Educator badge. And once you have, if you show that to me, or send me an email with it in, perhaps a screenshot, and then I will make sure that you get a physical Microsoft Educator pin badge, because I've got lots of those waiting to be given out. Thank you very much for listening over the last 4 weeks, whether you've done it in person, online, or a mixture. It's been great to hear people's ideas. Remember, there are 2 Microsoft Advanced Educator pathways. Perhaps over the summer you'd like to have a look at those. We may, if there's demand, run some live courses towards those, but they're a little bit longer. They would be probably 8-hour-long sessions, and there are 2 different pathways. I don't think we could run them both simultaneously, but we could certainly have a look. So do let me know if you're interested in doing that. You can do it self-paced online, or we can perhaps get a group together who would be interested in doing that. Until then, keep ploughing on, have an experiment with classwork over the summer, and I'll look forward to hearing about all of your successes and discoveries.